Well, thank you, Brenda, and thank you, Dr. Hill, for having us all here, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I'm super excited about the panel of experts we have to hear from tonight, and I'm interested and excited to hear what they have to say about what's going on around education and workforce and how IUPUC has made an impact in that area. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to introduce each of the panelists one at a time, tell you a little bit about them, give some background, and I'm going to ask them as I introduce them to give their perspective on what it means to have an educated workforce. So I will start with John Burnett. John Burnett serves as the president and CEO of the nationally recognized Community Education Coalition. CEC is committed to the development of a coordinated learning system linking to economic opportunity and quality of life. He's co-founder of Civic Lab, an institute for civic collaboration, with his colleague Jack Hess. John is founder of Southeast Indiana's ECHO Network, which stands for Economic Opportunities Through Education. Launched in 2008, the network focuses on educational attainment leading to well-paying jobs. ECHO Network has been funded to date by more than $80 million in grants, including major gifts from the Lilly Endowment, a substantial funding from Cummins Foundation, Indiana Department of Workforce Development, Lumina Foundation, and most recently, Strada Education Network. And on a personal note, I've had the great pleasure of working with John for the last 6 years. And given that this is an IU event, I wanted to put a little plug in. John recently was announced in January, I believe, was awarded the Indiana University's President's Medal of Excellence, honoring his support for IU and his collaborative efforts to support education programs aligned with the needs of our community. So with that, John, I wonder if you could share a few words on what it means to have an educated workforce.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I wish you hadn't read any of that, because this work is about service to the development of the human potential. I'm really grateful that IUPUC has been here. I can't believe it, 50 years. I was 12, so now you know how old I was when IUPUC was first formed, and I realized the earlier names. But when I think about the educated workforce, I actually think about the people of Columbus and Southeast Indiana and the important value that IUPUC places on the development of the human potential and also on its contributions to the region. I think that I can't imagine anything more important than having an educated citizenry, especially as we move forward in this faster and faster paced time as it relates to what we do in our communities and the importance of the business community, the education world, and the community world as a whole. How all those things come together is vitally important, and IUPUC has been a major contributor to that through today, and I'm confident will be tomorrow. Last thing I'll reflect on right now is I've actually been around the entire time that these new programs have been coming on board, and the built environment as well here with the Learning Center and the Advanced Manufacturing Center of Excellence, and to see things grow from really a general studies diploma to the 11 undergrad programs and the master's degree programs now is just incredible and very grateful.
Great, thank you, John. So Srikanth Padmanabhan is Vice President for Cummins, Inc. and President of the Engine Business, the largest Cummins business segment. In this role, he pushes the boundaries of customer-focused innovation to position Cummins as the leading powertrain supplier of choice, with its portfolio ranging from diesel and natural gas to hybrid and electric powertrains. Srikanth holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the National Institute of Technology in Trichy, India, and a PhD in mechanical engineering from Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. He also is a graduate of the Advanced Management Program from Harvard Business School. So Srikanth, from your vantage point, what does it mean to have an educated workforce?
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you all for being here, and congratulations on the 50th anniversary of IUPUI and IUPUC. I was reflecting this morning. I was doing a town hall for our employees, and I was reflecting on the fact that Cummins, just exactly about 3 months and 100 years ago, was incorporated as a company in 1919, February 6th. And I was just thinking about that to say Klacik Cummins had an 8th grade education. And W.G. Irvin, who was the co-founder, who had the money, and he was the innovator and tinkerer, was a financial expert and had a degree from Butler University. And then fast forward almost 80, 90 years later, and you see the likes of Bill Gates dropping out of Harvard, Mark Zuckerberg dropping out of Harvard, and these inventors are always like that, where they end up doing things that they want to do. But for the rest of the masses, like most of us, education happens to be an important piece of things. And I was reflecting at the same time then, what was then versus what is now. 100 years ago, there were things still that was mechanical in nature. There was still entrepreneurism was something very important then, and it is still important today. But at that time, there was nothing called a computer that existed, which didn't happen until much later, 40 years later. And you fast forward as to where things are. If you ask what is the big mega trends that's going on 100 years later, 1903, Fifth Avenue in New York, there was not one automobile in 1903. Everything was driven by horse-drawn carriages. 16 years later, in 1919, when Cummins was formed, the same place, Easter, Fifth Avenue, there was only one horse-drawn carriage, and the rest of it were all automobiles. We're almost in that same inflection point as we think about right now, 100 years later. The mega trends that are happening for us are related to connectivity, automation, ride-sharing and subscription-based services, and electrification is happening. The things that we know that are today in terms of gasoline engines and diesel engines, 50 years from now, is we will have difficulty finding some of those in the way that we see it today. And that transformation, while that is going on, we're also in this world where there is emissions, CO2, and climate change is happening as we speak, which means the things that we are doing need to be more efficient, and the things that we are doing have to be something different than what we have. Otherwise, this world is not going to be there the same way that we see it today in the next 30 years or so. So as you see this, if you do not have an educated workforce, companies like Cummins will not survive another 50 more years. 86% of the companies that were in the S&P 500 in 1952 do not exist today. 86%, which means less than 14% of the companies still remain 50 years or 70 years from now. And if for Cummins to stay here the next 50 years or the next 100 years, an educated workforce plus a welcoming community where globalization and languages and others are happening as we speak, where the world is becoming one flat place, it's really, really important. So we'll continue on this conversation, but I'm just enormously excited as to what Cummins offers, this community offers, and this thriving symbiosis that happens between public-private partnership is just really beautiful. And you can't see that very many places, and in Columbus you see that every day.
Thank you. That's very well said. Thank you, Srikanth. So Dr. Jim Roberts serves as a superintendent of the Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation. Previously, Dr. Roberts was a superintendent for Batesville Schools, where he also served as an assistant high school principal, a high school principal, and assistant superintendent. He began his career teaching math and coaching basketball and baseball within the Flat Rock Hall Creek School Corporation. And Dr. Roberts has been a state and national presenter in the areas of school health and continuous improvement processes. He received an ISDH Wellness Champion Award in 2011. He was an IAPSS District 8 Superintendent of the Year in 2014 and 2016. And he earned the 2016 Governor and Sherry Daniels School Health Award. So Dr. Roberts, what does an educated workforce look like from the K-12 perspective?
I think whatever Srikanth said over here, that's what it looked for. Nice job, Srikanth, with that information. I'm going to try to tie my thoughts with that. in with perhaps what IUPUC is contributing and in conjunction with BCSE. Before I do that, I'm very proud to be sitting here. I look at the banner in front of me. It says IU 200 years. That's kind of cool. I attended that particular school. Spent some time in a course here, getting a master's degree at IUPUI Columbus in 1989, and also took some courses at IUPUI. So bringing everything together here in terms of some of my educational background. Also, the video, if you will have noticed, I think there were 4 maybe alumni that were featured in there. I tried to count, and 2 of them are BCSE employees. So we have done well in taking the best of what IUPUC has to offer and employing them within our school system. So Jenny Detmer, who is principal at Rock Creek, was featured in the video, as well as Gracie Patino. Gracie is a student that went through Columbus North High School, IUPUC, and then is with us. And I guess I would tie into Gracie very quickly. I think in terms of the importance of education and an educated workforce, today and tomorrow's workforce requires an increase in the educational attainment of our kids, of our citizenry. That doesn't mean that everybody needs a 4-year degree. It doesn't mean everybody needs to go to college, and we hear that. And sometimes as a school corporation, we're accused of that. Everybody has to go to college. You as a school, you're telling people that isn't the case. We are trying to ensure that each child finds the right path, and whatever post-secondary education, if that's what necessary, is important for that path. So try to give them the right training while they're in school. We have great programs and collaborations with probably each person at this table, and including IUPUC for that, but then also getting them into that right post-secondary opportunity. IUPUC is one of those tremendous community partners for us. I have the opportunity to serve on the advisory board, as probably a few people I see in here are also on that advisory board. And then have the chance to collaborate with IUPUC, with the Community Education Coalition. And I think it's important to bring that group up, because when we look at BCSE, Flat Rock Hall Creek Schools, IUPUC, Ivy Tech, Purdue Polytechnic, we have a group that is doing a nice job of collaborating with business partners within the community to ensure that we are increasing the educational attainment of the citizenry of this community, and ensuring that our employers have a well-educated, well-trained workforce. I look at what has happened here as a model of collaboration around the country. And I not just the way I look at it, I think John, others here can attest to that in terms of the reputation and the CEC's work specifically in going out around the country. When I was at Batesville and was trying to figure out how to best educate the kids that I was working with to be prepared for the workforce in that area and beyond, Columbus in this area was the program, the model that we attempted to mimic, and I think that's key. As we move forward and we try to ensure that we are educating this citizenry as well as possible, I believe it's doing a great job in a very diverse community and focusing on key employment needs. And when I mentioned diversity, I've had this conversation recently. Our community, I don't know if you go through all the statistical pieces, if this would play out per se, but it has to be one of the most diverse in the state of Indiana when you look at all the ways that you can measure diversity. So we think of race and ethnicity as one of those, and we are a school corporation now that's 70% white. When I was in Columbus 25 years ago, that number was 95%, so we're changing from a demographic, racial, ethnicity, from a diversity standpoint that way, but also urban-rural. We're a city of 45,000, but we're also then a county of about 80,000. So we go out beyond the city. Our school buses drive 4,000 miles a day and cross those darn railroad tracks 350 times a day. We have the political, left, right, whatever it may be. We have a variety when we look at politics, and even from a socioeconomic standpoint. When you look at our community, you might guess a certain free and reduced lunch percentage, but you may not be correct when you give me that percentage. We are approaching 50% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, but we know that we have also families that that have a lot of money, and then families that simply do not. And so as we try to address the needs of a very diverse community, it takes that collaboration, takes the effort to take the work of IUPUC, and then to focus on the key employment needs of this area, which include advanced manufacturing, healthcare, IT, criminal justice, education, IT. Right now, BCSE is currently working with IUPUI and IUPUC on a partnering possibility to offer an IT curriculum in the 2020-21 school year. So looking ahead to that possibility, and that would be a project-based approach and piloted at CSA New Tech, which is our project-based learning school. From an education standpoint, I think about Gracie Patino. We know from a recruitment retention standpoint and looking at teachers that are going to step into our system and then stay here, it's probably good to grow our own. And IUPUC is a big help in that in the elementary education program they have here, and working towards some secondary options as we move forward in other specialty areas. But Gracie, Columbus North grad, here back with us, and she is leading our Legato Spanish Immersion Academy. If you're not familiar with that program, I'd love to talk about it. I don't have time. But it is a program we started at Clifton Creek Elementary School. We have students, 80% of their day is with the Spanish language, and Gracie is really our lead teacher in regards to that. So I thank IUPUC for everything that they've done in contributing to this community and helping us ensure that we have a well-educated citizenry for the community of Columbus and Bartholomew County.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Excellent points. Really, I want to cheer. I want to just go, yes. So we have Daniel Noel. He is the Director for Clinical Talent at Columbus Regional Health. In that role, he provides leadership, direction, and administration of clinical education and development, including continuous improvement of nursing services to meet the needs and expectations of those served by the Columbus Regional Health System. He began his career at Columbus Regional Health in 1999, leveraging his degree in health and nutrition to become the coordinator of food services. His interest in nursing led him to go back to school to get his licensed practical nurse certification, his associate degree in nursing, and ultimately a bachelor degree in nursing from IUPUI. In his spare time, Daniel serves as a tour guide for the Columbus Architecture Tours. So from the perspective of healthcare and your history, what is an educated workforce?
Well, I really have to echo what Dr. Roberts said with the community and with our partnerships with IUPUC. I mean, in my own experience, you know, I was able to kind of grow up in the community. The hospital supported me through my career. IUPUC offered lots of opportunities. In my current role with clinical talent at the hospital, you know, we're looking at, you know, how do we provide the best educated workforce within our facility and within our system. It's been proven by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that increased BSN workforce lowers your mortality, decreases bad outcomes, and so, you know, we appreciate our partnership with IUPUC to produce those BSN nurses. You know, we within Clinical Talent are trying to focus on what are different healthcare pathways that include technology, what opportunities are out there for each individual, how can we skill them up to their highest potential, because it's not just about nurses in healthcare, it's about the medical assistants, it's about the phlebotomists, it's about the pharmacy techs, the pharmacists. How do we work as a team? And how do we help them navigate those options? Because there's lots of options out there. There's lots of ways to get your education. And how do we focus on making it affordable and attainable for them? You know, and how can we get the students the education that they need so that they can graduate with the hope of bringing a higher level of skill to our community and having more resources for them and their family to create a better future.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Next up, we have Amy Conrad Warner. She is the Vice Chancellor for Community Engagement at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. In that role, Amy develops mutually beneficial partnerships between IUPUI and organizations that make Central Indiana a better place to live, work, and learn. Amy aligns university resources with partners to fuel economic development, improve the quality of life, and address critical societal issues in Indiana and beyond. Since 1997, she has provided leadership to the university in strategic marketing and communication, community relations and regional economic development, government relations, alumni affairs, and fundraising. So Amy, through your lens at IUPUI, what does it mean to have an educated workforce?
Thank you. When I was thinking about this question on the drive over here, I tried to really get to the bottom of it and to say, what's Indiana's benefit to an educated workforce, and then how are we as citizens benefiting from that? And as I step back and think about what I've heard today, we're looking at opportunities for people to take care of their families, for people to live healthy lives, for people to be creative and create artwork and produce ideas. If you have an education, the opportunities are extended to you to try more and more opportunities to monetize those creative activities or that special subject matter expertise. So at the bottom line, at the very center of the growth of any economy really has to do with an educated workforce. If the workforce can contribute to the bottom line goals of corporations that are already located in the region, fantastic. If they're educated and they've already worked in one of these large enterprises, they can set up a startup operation. They can create intellectual property. They can create spin-off companies and look for new ways to create a livelihood for themselves and contribute to the well-being of the region. So when I think about an educated workforce for Indiana and for Columbus and this region, we've got the staying power of people who are willing to work hard. We already have that in the DNA of the people who are living in this region. We have creativity and technical integrity that has been the livelihood, as was described from the home base of technical engineering that's here in Columbus. So we have all this technical expertise, and now we need to sort of fine-tune what it means to have knowledge. What does it mean for our employees to be able to make great decisions for themselves and for their families? What does it mean for them to be able to say, you know what, I think I'd like to be in the IT department, and I know I'm in the data services area, but I'd like to be able to create new data and new information and make it available to our partners across the world. So future workers will benefit from the K-12 system. They will benefit from higher education. But we're among a rising generation that believes learning is at your fingertips and is there in an instant. So our job to create a successful Indiana and a successful educated workforce is to continuously watch where industry is going, continuously watch how people learn and how they adapt what they have learned in the past to their marketplace to be able to make themselves relevant and to make themselves self-sufficient. One other thing that I just would like to share that I think is important, and from being in the higher education space for a long time, I know that individuals who are able to enter college and are able to take advantage of what we're offering are in the forefront of the workforce now, and they have a lot more flexibility to choose these jobs. One of the challenges for us in the future is an inclusive workforce. And if we intend to be more global and we intend to have partners across the world, we need to be able to be culturally competent. We need to be able to understand what the drivers are in those marketplaces, what the customs are, what are the preferences, how do we learn to work collectively together. So I do believe that when I think about Indiana for the future, we've been beneficiaries of being hardworking people in the Midwest that get up early and stay up late and work hard. And that has gotten us here so far. And now if we could just have a little special something special sauce to permit us that innovation and that knowledge attraction that we have, I really think that we are the type of people that are invested in making a difference in the places in which we live. And I think that's evidenced by so many people who are from Indiana and then return to Indiana or who attract others here. So in my opinion, when I look at the workforce issues, we have the raw material, we have the human beings, we have the numbers. We just need to guide them to the right way to continue learning and the right way to continue developing the subject matter expertise that can serve them for the long run.
Thank you very much. Again, absolutely. I want to cheer. So last but not least, we have one of our great partners, Drew Klacik. Drew is a senior policy analyst at the Indiana University Public Policy Institute. Drew was born in Northwest Indiana, which happens to be my home region as well. He earned a bachelor's degree from Purdue and a master's in urban planning at Ball State. He previously worked for the city of Indianapolis, where he was part of the economic development team that helped transform downtown Indianapolis. He's now senior policy analyst at IUPUC Policy Institute, where he works collaboratively with others on complex interrelated issues and building a thriving region and state. Recent projects included working with Indy Chamber and the Brookings Institute on the Brookings-sponsored Income Disparity Lab and the Public Policy Institute's Thriving Community, Thriving State effort to provide a series of recommendations for Indiana's urban, suburban, and rural places. Drew, would you help us understand what does it mean to you to have an educated workforce?
I think everybody already made all the points I was going to make, so I've rewritten my speech probably, or talk, 3 or 4 times since this started. Let me start by saying the regional campuses are essential. I wouldn't be here without what used to be Purdue Calumet. It is now called Purdue Northwest. When I was getting out of high school, I only knew 2 things. I didn't want to work at a steel mill, and I didn't want to go to Vietnam. So I ended up at this place called Purdue Calumet, and professors there taught me that it wasn't, not only was it not uncool to learn, but that it was actually cool to learn. And without them and that regional campus, I wouldn't be here today. I start with that because it's your 50th anniversary and ours, right? Then I would also say, before I get into workforce, that when I got to IUPUI, I had the pleasure of working with a man named Bill Plater, who would constantly remind me that I had a mission that was really important because I worked at a community serving university, and it was our job to contribute to making a better community at the same time as we were educating the students that were in our classrooms. And both, I know that IUPUC and IUPUI both take that really, really importantly and seriously. So, on to the workforce part. Some of this is going to sound familiar to you, but I kind of think of it from, well, what does a workforce mean to the community, and what does being an educated workforce mean to the workforce? Does that make kind of sense? And from my perspective, if the more educated workforce you have, the more vibrant your community is, the more innovative your community is, the more productive your community is. If those things are going well, you're a thriving community, which really then means if you want cool restaurants, if you want nice theaters, if you want good breweries, if you want all that stuff, you have to have a productive workforce, because if you don't have a productive workforce, those things aren't around you. And so a productive workforce is an essential piece of a thriving community where people are happy to live, right? So that's kind of the big picture. And then if you're a human being, what does a productive workforce mean to you? When we did Thriving Communities, Thriving States, we separated the state up into urban, rural, and suburban, and I thought people would want radically different things based on where you live. It turns out it's really simple. It doesn't matter where you live. What you want to do is know that you have the ability to make your children's life better than yours and your grandchildren's life better than theirs, so to speak. And then you want to be proud of the community you live in. And it doesn't matter where you live for that. So that's what, in a sense, an educated workforce means to a person. For a person, an educated workforce is opportunity. It's the opportunity to have the ability to ensure that your children and your grandchildren will be doing as well as, if not better than you, which is a remarkable thing, again, that almost everybody wants. And then I think the more education you have in a world where change, I worked on a project where somebody said something that I will now say because I thought it was profound. I just want you to know it wasn't me, is that the only skill that matters is adaptability. And the more skill you have, the more adaptive you are, right? And that adaptability is really important because in a fast-changing world, what an educated, skilled workforce means is that each human being has the ability to flex when the world flexes and ensure that they continue to remain productive. What you don't want to be is trapped in a position where you had the ability to make your children's life better than yours and it went away because some sort of change occurred globally or through automation. And so again, for people, it's opportunity, it's hope, it's control, it's providing options. Last point I'll make, and then we can get on to the next piece, is that educated workforce matters, but you can't just have an educated workforce without context around it. If you're educating your workforce and you're not creating jobs that match up with the skills you're providing your workforce, it's actually a talent export strategy. And so you have to think about the interrelationship between the kind of skills you're providing your workforce and the kind of jobs that exist in your community. And then last but not least, if you don't have a high quality of life, if you don't have good schools, safe neighborhoods, and place people to be proud of, they're going to move away too. And so an educated workforce is one part of building a great community. The other two pieces are having a vibrant economy to capture those skilled workers and to have a high quality of life that makes them want to stay here even though they've now attained enough skill that they can choose where they live. And with that, I'm done, and I think I turned off this mic, right?
awesome. That was outstanding. Thank you all very, very much. I'm going to step out from behind the microphone so I can see your faces, now that I don't have to read long paragraphs. So we're going to dig a little deeper, and we have some really great questions for you. The first one is, I'd like you to think about and sort of share your ideas, your thoughts on how IUPUC has increasingly contributed to the learning system of our region over the past 20 years. And I think I'd like to start with John and then open it up to the group, since John's really been here for the past 20 years and engaged in this work on the campus. So John, what are your thoughts? Last 20 years in review.
Last 20 years, it was great. When I think about what's happened over the last 20 years, I think mostly about the foundation that's being established for the future of IUPUC and this campus, this community, and this region. That's what I really think about. The degree programs that were in place, I remember because I was one of the folks that was asked to do a study in 1999. There was one bachelor's degree at IUPUC General Studies, and then Purdue College of Technology at the time had one degree, and that was the organizational leadership and supervision. So that was it. There were a lot of things you could do to start, but not complete here. Today, a vast variety of opportunities to pursue. And at the same time, so I'm really talking about the future as much. Those are foundational. What happens in the future with the things that all of our panelists have talked about, and I particularly refer to what Srikanth was talking about in terms of the technologies that are happening here in our own community and around the country and around the world, the environmental changes, all those different things. It brings me back to foundational opportunities. The other thing it reminds me of is how important this campus is to the students, to the human beings that are here. When this campus, 20 years ago, mostly first generation college-going students. Hopefully, 20 years later, fewer are first generation. But I must say, if you look around the region from which the student population is drawn, still a lot of the students are first generation. So creating this magnet here, mixing metaphors, used to be an English major, so forgive me. But building that foundation for the future is vital. And who knows what kinds of programs and services are going to be needed. But I do know that the foundation is in place, and again, very grateful for that.
Thank you. So a lot of growth in education programs over the years. Other thoughts around IUPUC and how IUPUC has contributed to the learning system here locally?
I hope that. Tell me if you can hear this.
That's good.
Can you hear okay? All right. So I feel like an old timer, John. Thanks for bringing up some of that. I started working with IUPUC when Paul Bippen was here. And I work with Nasser Paydar, Marwan Wafa, and now, fortunately, Dr. Hill. And there are a couple things that have been, to me, striking and remarkable. One is the educational support that you have in the community that has grown and was referenced in the introduction for John. The idea that industry wants to see IUPUC successful is an incredible attribute. The fact that you're working with companies who have an educated workforce, whether it's the hospitals, whether it's Cummins, what other organizations are already in the infrastructure of this region, they depend on the institution for these additional degrees. For the second generation of individuals who have come through the programs, I think it's also been really wonderful to watch that there are so many, an increase in the number of younger students that are coming and taking more credit hours per semester, that it enables them to complete more quickly and be more deeply engaged in the workforce. And then finally, the faculty who have come to this campus and who want to stay here. So they come and find that the community is welcoming, and they come and find that they can do meaningful work in their teaching and instruction, and also in their research. So to watch this over the years is really, really, really wonderful, especially as Dr. Hill mentioned in his comments, the completion of degrees that students had brought with them from previous lives or from the early part of their careers, that all of those individuals have gone back now into the workforce and are contributing to the well-being of the area. So over the 20 years, you have a lot of graduates who are staying here and who are sending their families and who are bringing the good work that's come from the institution into the community.
You know, 20 years ago, we didn't have a nursing degree. We didn't have an engineering degree. So I'm curious, from the employer side, what does it mean to have a 4-year nursing degree as well as now a master's family nurse practitioner program as an example? What does that mean to an employer?
That's what I was going to touch on a little bit. So, you know, as John said, IUPUC has really advanced what they've provided. And as I arrived this evening, I was looking at their timeline, and one of the timeline points was talking about how they had an anatomically correct model that they were using for education. And we went from that to, when I was here, we were practicing on each other. And now they have these beautiful sim labs where you have mannequins that can simulate blood pressures, that can simulate crackles in the lungs, that can simulate all these different highly acute medical problems and allow these nurses to critically think through different processes. And that is so important for our community. That critical thinking is so important when we get into healthcare and the other areas. And you know, even now they're developing an MSN program, and you know how we can and how they've partnered with the hospital and how they've partnered with the physicians here in the community to develop that program and make sure that the nurse practitioners that they're producing are what the physicians want to work with and have the knowledge that they need to really serve our community well.
Thank you. Srikanth, any thoughts? What does it mean to, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Just going to add very quickly that, and I think most of it's been said, but in a short answer in regards to the impact here to the community or locally is, I think that IUPUC over the last 20 years has done a great job paying attention to those employment needs and creating programming and specific degrees to address that. From a BCSE standpoint, when we look at students going out to school to post-secondary option, a lot of barriers are eliminated by having this regional opportunities, so cost, location, and when we think about the number of kids who apply for a post-secondary institution, the highest number would be to either IUPUC or Ivy Tech. So our kids are paying attention to those local options and applying and coming here to these options.
Several things that you guys talked about, organizational leadership and supervision. That's one thing that is many people that are here locally could actually take up jobs in our supervisory roles. When you think about mechanical engineering or engineering technology programs, we end up sourcing from a variety of universities, and mainly many of them are Big Ten. There are a lot of good schools, Purdue, IU, Ohio State, Michigan State. These are the places that we go to on a regular basis. So when you think about the kinds of people that we get from here, many of them are from the 10-county areas who want to stay here. Sometimes when we get people from there, they are mobile and they want to go different places than others. We now have, I think at last count, Brenda, we were talking about close to 50 people that are working at Cummins that graduated from IUPUC, which is really terrific. And many of these kids, some of these kids that I've met as well, are, like you said, that the demographics of this place is changing from 95% to 70% in terms of what the population is, which means that there is a bigger Hispanic group that is there. We have kids that are DACA kids that work there, that feel like that there is an opportunity for them to go and do well. And many of these people are really, really doing well. And some of them might have real educational experiences from Big Ten schools and big schools, but some kids from locally are actually practical and can apply them. So if we can get these kids and allow them to stay in this community and are practical, that is terrific that we could actually have, I think. The other bit that we see is there are lots of people that want to do continuous improvement and development of themselves, and many of them go on to do MBA. And that's the other thing where IUPUC has helped us quite a bit. There are a lot of people that do not want to go to another place because they have family and they have other restrictions that they have, but they can actually go for a business school in the evening, which has worked out really well as well.
Thank you. Drew?
So I kind of feel like I should talk since everybody else did.
don't have to.
But I really don't have that much to say, other than one of the first times I was hanging around with John Burnett, he basically said something to the effect of, hey, we're Columbus, Indiana, and we want to be the best community of our type in the country. And then eventually said, will you figure out if we actually are? And it turns out it's really hard to find somebody who's better than you all. And I can tell you with great confidence that without IUPUC, it would be way easier to find communities that are better than you.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, thank you, Drew. Okay, the next topic we want to touch on is really this question of what does an educated workforce look like in the future? And so maybe if we could start again with our employer partners, what does the workforce of the future look like in manufacturing, technology, and in healthcare? Srikanth, you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. This past year, Cummins produced about 1.5 million engines. We have about roughly 62,000 employees. And when you include some of the joint ventures that we have in China, India, Russia, Brazil, Japan, we have about 80,000 employees. And when you look at that population, about 55% of that population is actually an hourly workforce population. And the rest of it is what we would call as salaried or exempt population. Which means that for all those people, we have to locally source those people. Not everyone can actually be recruited from other parts of the world and they could come here. Columbus is the highest per capita of mechanical engineers in the country. Columbus also happens to be the highest per capita of H-1B visas in this community. And when you think about those two, that is just remarkable that you could actually think about all that is happening in a small town, which is why Columbus is a special place, I think, that you can actually see that in a small town of 40,000 or 80,000, depending on how you look at it, that is there. Now, I talked to you about the mobility and transportation, the big shifts that are happening in front of us. It's the seismic shift that is happening. And equally, in our factory floors, things are changing. Because of each one of you have a mobile phone, you all have a wireless network, you all have things that you could do something with, which actually becomes difficult, where we are talking about cybersecurity. The ability to have Internet of Things on every device that we have makes it quite difficult in terms of the pervasive use of IT in the workforce. I'm so glad that Dr. Roberts said that we are going to have an IT program there. I would like every kid that is 7th grade or 6th grade being able to code. I don't know when we will get there, but this is something that if we could actually do, we could transform these places to be these innovative hubs that we were talking about earlier. There is nothing that prevents Columbus, Indiana to be an innovative hub if we could actually do some of these startups right here, right? And equally, some of this thing, the topic that I was talking about, mechanical engineering, I don't know 50 years from now, it is all going to be the same in terms of mechanical engineering. It's going to be electrical, it's going to be computer stuff, it's going to be electronic things that combine with, integrated with mechanical systems. The other bit, why I think this idea of the intersection of psychology, cognitive stuff, and others are also one thing that I think people will start doing more and more, because of the fact that as we think about leadership, as we think about how do you collaborate with each other and how do you work with each other, that seems to be a thing that is starting to become bigger and bigger, at least at Cummins and other places. But being able to think about that and being able to have people that can actually help us with emotional intelligence, with other things, would be something that I think is going to become a big thing in the future.
Great, thank you. Daniel, your thoughts on the future of healthcare workforce?
You know, I just have to echo what he said, because some of the when we think about technology and how it's so rapidly changing, it's not only affecting manufacturing but healthcare as well. So much of what we do in healthcare now depends on technology, and some of the careers that are going to be out there in the future haven't even been thought of yet. And so how do we incorporate technology into what we're doing? So how do we make nurses more technologically savvy. You know, right now we're implementing an electronic medical record or a new electronic medical record at the hospital, and we have nurses, phlebotomists, pharmacists writing code. Not only because not because they knew code from the beginning, but because they understand the clinical aspects of how that electronic medical record is going to affect the work that we do. And so it becomes ever more important that they have that depth of knowledge bringing into the workforce.
Thank you, Daniel.
Kathy, if I could just add real quick, as we think about specific skill sets moving into the workforce of the future, as a school corporation, we do feel like we are trying to train kids for jobs that don't yet exist. So whatever is out there that they have to get ready for. And so in trying to do that, we focus on expert learners and trying to develop expert learners and students, people who would be considered expert learners would be goal-directed, strategic, resourceful, purposeful, motivated, and knowledgeable. So each of those pieces. Additionally, I would add, and it's, I guess, coincidental that it happened today, but we had our Governor's Work Ethic Certificate celebration today. So we have started a program where we're recognizing students who are able to develop and demonstrate these kinds of skills, as well as a list of others, as well as things like being on at school every day and getting good grades and behaving appropriately. But we had that recognition today and had community and business partners tied into that. And what I've listed so far, all of that came about from conversations with this community, collaborating around that, telling us the kinds of skills they want to see, and then allowing us to acknowledge that with our graduates and sending them out of the workforce.
Really gets to what Srikanth was saying around the teamwork skills, the cognitive aspects, you know, students having those soft skills to go into the workforce. Other thoughts?
Can I go not last? So I think the first thing is I have no idea, but I actually want to talk because I like to hear myself, Noel. I have really no idea what the workforce is going to look like in terms of what they actually do, but I know it's going to be more diverse than it is today, and it's going to be more diverse from an age perspective. It's going to be more diverse from ethnicity and race, and it's going to be more diverse based on gender. And if you don't like that, you probably need to leave the United States because it's our only way forward. The second thing is it's going to be way more productive. We're going to be doing less labor and use technology more and more, which would have been really hard for my grandfather because he was big, couldn't speak English, and had no ability, no demonstrable education. But in his day, shoveling coal was enough to let my dad go to college and me sit up here, right? In the future, it's going to be much harder to go from poor to rich if you don't have the ability to use technology. And then I think adaptability and flexibility is going to be a really essential element to every worker. Change is not going to slow down. Change is only going to accelerate. And if we as workers can't keep up with it, we're basically not going to be workers. And then my hope would be the workforce would be more curious and more invested in their community.
Thank you, Drew. Other thoughts? Amy or John?
If you go to the Lumina Foundation website and you look at the statistics nationally for today's students, it's astounding. I just came back from the national convening where we were doing some workshops, and there are a couple of things, because I won't read all the stats off, you can read those for yourself. A couple things that occur to me. One is that less than 20% of the students that are going to college right now, college, university, pursuing post-secondary credentials, less than 20% are on residential campuses in the country. That means 80% of us, 80% of the people who are learning, obviously, are coming to IUPUC and to other campuses all around the country. So when you think about an educated workforce of the future, that's important. The other thing that's important is the thing that's been talked about oftentimes already tonight is around equity and inclusion and diversity. Having grown up here, it is a very different and really a wonderful place to be now versus then. I love growing up here, but to be a part of an international community is something that I think is vitally important. And if we're going to attract, develop, and connect the type of talent that's going to be required. Our employer partners here and other colleagues along the line here can speak to that, but it's all those things are going to add up. And so having this campus here is just going to be more important as we move forward. So check out the Lumina stats, because it would be cool to think about how those statistics translate to our local community. Most students are not traditional, would be my last comment. There is no such thing as a traditional student anymore, because so many people are working, trying to make a living while they're working, while they're being educated.
The only thing that I was going to add is over time, subject matter expertise and excellence in a certain area is rewarded in some way. It's either rewarded in your employability, it's rewarded in your certifications, it's awarded in some way. And I think that narrow subject matter expertise will become incredibly valuable, because place in many ways may be irrelevant. If you are the wisest person on the earth and can better understand water quality decisions across the globe from your desktop, you can provide that consultation and advice from anywhere you are in the world. And you can choose to be in a place where you find community and where you find all the aesthetics that Drew mentioned in his comments. So one thing I think is going to continue to rise is that as people begin to think about their own development after their K-12 experience and say, how do I want to be known? How do I want to be contributing to society? I believe that they'll be getting this narrower and narrower path on excellence, and then a whole bunch of general stuff. You know, so I could be a data analytics specialist from my home, but I can learn online how to watercolor paint or how to clean out my fireplace. So what I'm saying is, I think that some of the basic things that we're doing in adult education and that we're doing in higher education today will probably be things that people learn on their own. In very different ways online, or little YouTube videos, or smaller ways to digest exactly where they are in that learning chain. And then on the other end, on this high intellectual, high mental capability work, experts will want to be together and will want to draw from each other and be able to use that knowledge sort of as a commodity and help develop the next product, or help solve the next world problem, or help create policy that can avoid problems for the future. So I also think that very narrow, very top of the pinnacle of knowledge is going to be something that we'll also see developing in greater numbers in the future.
Great, thank you. This next question you've touched on and may have answered it in a few ways, but this really gets to, given what we've just talked about around the future of the workforce, what does that mean for post-secondary education in adapting to and supporting the future workforce? So maybe Amy, I would like to start with you. How do universities kind of adapt and understand what the needs are in the workforce, and how will they need to change moving forward?
So everybody knows universities are really nimble and adaptive. That was supposed to be a joke. So we have a lot of work to do. Higher ed has a tremendous amount of work to do, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world. And I think educational institutions are learning from these new learners that are entering the institutions, how they learn, how they study, how they share knowledge. So I do think we'll see the emergence of certificates and badges and smaller bits of learning that are created with industry or with major social and world issues that will help shape and change policy. So I think there'll be smaller nuggets of things that you put together around something that you view to be your core area of knowledge that you're most interested in. I think we're going to see more prior learning assessment. So basically coming to the table by saying, here are the things I already know. Help me advance in these areas that I'm most interested. So I think there's going to be a much more customized approach to how people learn what they need and what they think they need. The other layer to that is, and I think I'm right on this, but you guys decide. as two of our speakers mentioned, this idea of access to education and access to innovation also creates tensions that we aren't really thinking about. So if you were to take our existing community and our existing workforce and you ratchet up the knowledge and the analytics up 50% of what it is now, just imagine your town hall meetings. Just imagine who you're electing to office. Just imagine the parent-teacher conferences in the classroom. Just imagine what the kids bring home to talk about at the end of the day. So as we move knowledge up the ladder, we're going to have more conflict. We're going to have greater options to choose from that are thought out according to different disciplines and different cultures and different ways of looking at the world. So I do think universities have to change, and we also have to teach people to critically analyze ideas and be open and welcoming and civilized to people who are of another view or another option.
Drew, I'd love to ask you this, be the second respondent to this question. Would you mind?
I was actually hoping to go last on this one. So I think the community serving model is going to become increasingly important. If we can't prove to you that we're making your community better, we're going to have a hard time arguing for why we deserve to exist. And then the second thing we have to do a lot better at is figuring out how to, if talent is what matters, we have to learn how to be more inclusive in who gets to attend a university and how we reach out to them. There's about 500,000 people in central Indiana that haven't really had access to education. That's on K through 12, and it's also on universities. And if we know the relationship between education and wealth and flexibility, then universities have to figure out not how to be more elite, but how to be more like these communities like us, IUPUI and IUPUC, that actually are embedded in the community and provide opportunity regardless of the household you were born into.
Thank you. Other thoughts on how post-secondary education will look or need to look in the future?
Well, the demographics are such that every human being in this community, in this region, in this state, are going to need to be served in ways that have been described here and more, because if you just look at the sheer numbers, in terms of what Indiana has about 6.5 million people, and Southeast Indiana has about 350,000 people. And last I looked, and our friend Drew can tell us about this probably just off the top of his head, we're not growing very fast. Columbus itself grew 6.8% from 2010 to 2017. The state of Indiana grew less than 3%. And if you look forward, we're not really growing that fast. We have no mountains, we have no beaches, I realize that. But that whole strategy of bringing people in is vitally important. It's also important to figure out how we're going to reach out to the people who are here. So.
Dr. Roberts, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this question with respect to the fact that so many more high school students are coming away with college credits. And I'll just state, I'd like to state this fact that was published of Commission for Higher Ed this year. You know, there's a lot of students in this part of the state, more so than any other part of the state, graduating high school with 80% of the students are coming out of high school with dual credit, with college credits, AP or college credits. There are 5 counties in this part of the state that are achieving that, and only 1 county anyplace else in the state. So there's something happening there, and I wonder if we'll see more of that in the future, if that's part of the future of post-secondary education, is gaining it sooner.
I think so, Kathy, and as I dig into that question a little bit, I'll take an opportunity to celebrate some of the successes we've had. Columbus North recently recognized for its performance on AP exams. So AP tests have, students have the opportunity to take a class, take that test, and get college credit, and over 25% of the class of 2018, so it goes back a year participated and passed an AP exam, and that is being celebrated at the Department of Education offices in June. So we do have a lot of students taking classes in a lot of different ways and getting those post-secondary credits, and therefore providing an opportunity for families to have cost savings as students go into school. So I see that as important. I see more opportunities being created. There are some challenges with that based upon some federal complications, barriers that have been put in place in terms of teacher training and credentials that are able to offer dual credit opportunities in the high school level. So we'll have to wrestle with that. In regards to this question specifically, we did have, by the way, an opportunity to kind of look at these a little. This was one that I thought most of the things I said in number 1 and 2 was probably going to apply, but a short answer to the importance of post-secondary education given increasing automation was it's only going to increase. That the high-paying jobs would be available to our kids. It's going to be a small amount available for kids who don't have some kind of post-secondary education or training. There will be some specialized skills, specialized situations, service industry, hospitality industry perhaps, but that those jobs that are high paying and that will help develop us as a community that is thriving, there is some kind of post-secondary training necessary. What we're doing at the school system right now with offering dual credits certainly helps advance that opportunity for kids.
Absolutely. Thank you. Srikanth or Daniel?
Now, the one thing that I thought that is slightly different from this is post-secondary education here versus post-secondary educations around the world, particularly Korea, China, India, and those places. And in this global world, as we compete for talent, that's one thing that we ought to be careful about as to how, because I think it has become a level playing field with this use of technology now that people have access to most things. Before, it used to be that if you didn't have the encyclopedia, you didn't know what it is, but now you have Wikipedia and you have Google and other things, which becomes that democratization of data and availability of information makes it easier for lots of people to get going on things. One of the things that we are thinking, for example, right now is that in the early part where we were trying to do automobiles versus where we are now going to electrification, China is saying that we can actually take a lead in comparison because it is a level playing field where we're all starting from scratch. You don't need to be in Germany, you don't need to be in the United States, you don't need to be in Japan to create the electric cars of the future, and we can start from scratch, which means government intervention of huge in terms of subsidies and technology infrastructure is happening in many of those places that somehow this country is not able to figure this out and we are able to do this, which I worry about because in many technologies, whether it's nanotechnology, whether it is 3D printing, whether it is some of those kinds of technology, there are other countries that are actually spending lots of money right now that we are not spending on, which I worry about in terms of how higher education is going to be and how we will support the future, because this growing disparity that is happening with people that do not have a higher education versus this is only causing more angst and more inequality that is there, which also perpetuates a few other things as well in the larger community.
I mean, just to highlight that point, it's estimated that by 2025, 60% of all jobs will require some post-secondary education. That could be a technical certificate, a short-term credential, a 2-year degree or more. Today in this county, 42% of adults have a 2-year degree or more. But if you look at the region in southeast Indiana, it's 32%. So we're kind of a long way off from meeting the needs of workforce in terms of that post-secondary attainment. And so we've got a lot of catch-up to do, and I think, you all have kind of touched on that. So given that, and what you've just heard, I'd like to ask you all, what is the role of this campus in creating an educated workforce, especially as the economy continues to shift and as the demands change with automation in the future? So I'll just open it up, what your thoughts might be.
This may be an indirect answer to your question, but I do want to raise it. And I'm going to give our friend Dr. Roberts the opportunity not to have to be the one to raise this because it's so vitally important to all of us. Teacher education and the retention of teachers and the development of teachers today and in the future is really, really important at all levels. I'm particularly talking about K-12 right this second, but I also realize from a faculty standpoint, attracting faculty is also a challenge, and just the sheer numbers. When I think about that, and then I think about the investment that's being made in education, you connect those two things. And I'm really not trying to be political. I'm just trying to say that there are not enough human beings that are going into the teaching profession, in part because people can get terrific paying jobs elsewhere, and also in part, well, that's really a main motivator, because probably all of us know teachers who are really, really good, and they're thinking about getting out of the profession because they can make a lot more money and they want to take care of themselves and their families. So how that unfolds, when I think about IUPUC, I actually think there could be some really cool strategies around teacher, along with the community. So this isn't just about the school district and IUPUC, but all of us working together to attract those teachers here, to compensate them well while the government's trying to figure it out, which is usually how Columbus works. When it works well, it usually figures things out, even when there are a lot of barriers getting in the way. So that didn't exactly answer your question, but I wanted to say it now because it was on my mind. And been on a lot of planes these days, but that teacher education, development of teachers, retention of teachers at all levels will be vital.
That does sound like a key role for this campus in the future. I think that's a great answer.
I would second what John just said. I do think it's interesting when we talk about an educated workforce, and we're spending a lot of time conversing about that. And in order to have an educated workforce, you do have to have quality educators. And so what are we doing to ensure that that's the case? And that goes from all kinds of levels. And obviously the legislative session just ended, and we were very active in trying to make sure we got certain things accomplished there. So a role IUPUC can play, Ronald, is to continue to work toward opportunities, options to help us develop that educated workforce. Doing a great job already. I think I've talked about that some, but continue to do that. I also think continue doing some of the things it's already doing, being a local option that is available to our citizenry, but also making sure to provide flexible opportunities, be creative, innovative. People seem to have a pretty hectic, crazy lifestyle these days, and how do we meet the demands of individuals trying to seek out education given the various challenges they might have?
I was thinking about a couple of things. One is particularly the point that you made, which is only 32% is educational attainment of post-secondary. If IUPUC can just focus on first-generation kids out of this 10-county area, imagine what the possibility that could be, because many of them end up staying here, which allows employers like us for them to be here, and that would give a constant source of employment opportunities, I think. The other thing that I would say with the demographic shift that is happening, I think going after some of the Hispanic community and being able to provide them opportunities where they feel comfortable that they can actually come here and they get an education would be useful. And the third thing that I think of is this whole idea of online bite-sized education is something that, whether it's Harvard or IUPUC, can equally do well, because I think this is where people, if they get something of value, and if you have trained professionals, no matter where they are, that could provide this particular education, where you have a network of people that are there, then you could have some really high quality material that you could provide for employers that people can actually take for. So those are three things that came to my mind.
That's great. Other thoughts? What's the role of this campus?
I think the university is going to have to wrestle hard with a couple things, and I think this is particularly true for community serving universities. The first is, are we skilling up for the local economy or for the global economy? And those can be two radically different things. We have to figure out a way to do both, right? Because we're invested in the local community, but we want our children and everybody's children to have whatever opportunity they want. So that tension between local and global, I think, is going to have to be figured out. And the second is kind of today versus tomorrow, where, to Amy's point, we're really nimble, but for the most part, we're teaching from what we knew towards what we think is out there today, and it takes 4 years or 2, depending on what you're doing, to get through. And as change accelerates, figuring out how to teach appropriately for tomorrow is going to be a big deal. And then kind of my fantasy of a university in the future is we kind of have some sort of imaginarium notion to us where we're going to live longer and we're going to have more spare time. So how do we make learning cool for everybody, regardless of age or anything else, in a way that lifts us up both as an economy and as society? And imaginarium is the best term I can come up with.
So I think there are just a couple other things to add that haven't already been said. One is, I think that institutions will have to really think differently about what employers need today and what they're projecting in the futures. So a really tight connection with what current employers are, and for those employers to also share who their competitors are and who their suppliers are. To be able to just have a roundtable, here's what we're doing, here are the deficiencies we're seeing, here are the skills we'd really like to see. Ultimately, I think employers would like to see an employee that will stay with them. And so if they have adaptability and they have a core sense of what's happening, I mean, that's exactly what Daniel did. I mean, he started in the beginning, got to know the healthcare environment, realized he wanted more education, continued through the hospital system, helped pay for that education. He was grown by industry. And there's nothing wrong with that, to be grown by an industry and to be learning hands-on while you're also learning as a college student. So I think intertangling these experiences are going to be mission critical. Another thing that I think higher ed can do really to help the campus be ready is to find ways to make entering and moving around the institution as easy as possible. And that way, back to the 32% of the students who aren't involved, this is a campus that can do some really creative things and can say, you know what we'd like to do is every student who graduates from Bartholomew County Schools comes out. Those students, if they have a grade point average of this, you're automatically admitted to IUPUC. You don't have to fill anything out. And by the way, if you let us know when you're a junior that you're scheduled to take these classes, we'll line your financial aid up for you in advance. I mean, there are things that deter young people from coming. And this is the kind of community and the kind of commitment that could press the envelope on that and be a very important national standard. So when I think about what all the campus can do for the economic development and the development of the region, there's a lot of innovation already here that you all are bringing from industry to this campus, and that's shaping the faculty, it's shaping the students, and it's causing these process improvements to happen and new ways of thinking.
I think that's a really excellent point. I speak to that quite a bit, the fact that we're a small community, we're a very rural region. We can actually be more flexible and agile because of that. We pretty much know each other at the table and most of us in the room because we're a small community. So I think we can be adaptable. I did want to follow up to Daniel to touch on a couple things. Srikanth, you mentioned the need to focus on first-generation students and the Latino students. But I think also if we're going to hit that 60%, we got to also think about adults. And Amy, you were speaking to that, and I was thinking about Daniel and your journey. I'm interested, what would your comments be around from the CRH perspective and what's happening today in terms of helping educate your incumbent employees to move up the education ladder?
Well, I think that's where we really have to start creating pathways so that we can see, so that those employees can see there's a possibility, that it's attainable. When we think about taking somebody who's a medical assistant, who has a certificate or is credentialed as a medical assistant, how do we help them understand, or how do we give them credit for the work that they've done as a medical assistant so that they can go back to school and become the next RN, or go back to school and get into information technology? How do we create those pathways so that they understand what that is? Because I think that's some of the barrier as well, where they just don't even know what's possible out there, or they don't know how they can get into that. But if we can give them those opportunities and then give them credit for what work they've already accomplished, I think that would be really vital for those people to get into the educational system.
I love that. We've got about 70,000 adults in the 10 counties of Southeast Indiana that have no college. And so that's a great target population. Many of them would like to go back. and gain an education. And it can be a short-term credential. It can be an 18-month technical certificate. So we have just a couple minutes left, and we have one final question. And it really is a great wrap-up question. You know, given all the discussion we've had, the question is about how do today employers, educators, and communities collaborate to identify local workforce needs and to develop strategies to meet those needs around education and workforce. What are some best practices, and how might that look different in the future? So I'm going to open it up.
So I want to start on this one because I really want to brag on the ECHO network. The Columbus Regional Health is part of that ECHO network, and it's really amazing how they've brought together healthcare providers in the region. So Major Hospital, Decatur Hospital, King's Daughters Hospital, Schneck Medical, CRH. We're all at the table with our partners at IUPUC and Ivy Tech, making decisions, talking about what our needs are, talking about what our opportunities are, and really doing some forward thinking about what education could be like so that we can provide a better future.
Thank you. And a shout out to you, Daniel. I mean, it's amazing to have 7 hospitals, Ivy Tech, IUPUC in the room, collaborating, working together, and sharing information rather than being sort of, you know, territorial. So it's amazing. So other thoughts on the collaboration?
I'll be relatively straightforward on this one, Kathy. First, I think we have a model in place in this community that, again, is the envy of people around the country, so we need to continue to capitalize on what the Community Education Coalition is doing. John and Jack are out and about all over the country all of the time, so that collaboration is important. We need to capitalize on that. In terms of the future and how things might look different, again, touting the education piece, without mind that education part of recruiting, retaining quality educators be front and center in terms of the dialogue and conversation and collaboration of the community as we develop that piece to help then develop the educated citizenry of this community.
Thank you.
You know, one thing I think about it is that when people talk about certain small communities or countries, they talk about Singapore, they talk about the Nordic countries. And historically, when you talk about those places, they all say, hey, Singapore is like Manhattan, so you can actually do something. Finland or Norway and others, they say, well, it's like Indiana, 5 million people, you can actually do something. And I'm thinking Columbus is a very small town. It is very special with the collaboration that is happening. But it's just a travesty that we have 32% attainment rate post-secondary education. And I just feel like that we have all the network and all the collaborative stuff that is there, but if you said by 2050 it should be 96%. How nice it would be that we could actually go and accomplish. That's kind of how I think about it when I say, here's an unforgettable place. By design, it is different. And even in this place, it is so difficult for us to go do the things that we want to get done because there is agreement, there is alignment, it feels like it. But making these things is hard, right? And so how do you go do that? That's probably the challenge that all of us you're here because of the fact that you care. And yet, how do we get the rest of the people? There are 48 people here, and we need to get the rest of the people to care as well. So, yeah, but the possibilities are immense.
Absolutely. Other thoughts?
So I think one of the biggest challenges to collaboration and sound policy is that we think of return on investment in a way too short a period of time. Everybody, like as the pace of change gets faster, we seem to want to make money or get a return on investment tomorrow. And the truth is, to really adapt to change, we have to start thinking of return on investment in 5 or 10 year periods again, because that's the only way that you can accept the kind of risk and mistake making we're going to have to make in order to be great somewhere down the, well, I shouldn't have probably said great, but to be very good and highly functional somewhere down the road. How's that?
Thank you.
So
Here we are at time, so
this
just
idea
a
of
couple
long-term,
quick responses. Sorry.
this idea of long-term thinking that Drew mentioned, I just want to share a program that we're involved in that is the center of the bullseye. The problem is, in the United States, fewer and fewer, smaller and smaller percentage of individuals of color and women are involved in the IT industry. So it's a national problem. It's not an international problem, but it's a national problem. And so one of my colleagues in Indianapolis said, you know, I've been watching this. what's the story here? You're from Indiana. How does this work? What's the problem? Where are the women? Where are the people of color? Why aren't they coming into these programs? And so, make a long story short, he said, you know what, we're just going to do this over a 10-year period of time to start with, and we'll see how it goes. So he involved 6 local schools in Indianapolis that had a high free and reduced lunch programs, large numbers of students of color, equal women, maybe even more than 50% women in the schools, and created these programs with the teachers inside the schools. So step 1 was, by the way, I noticed you have an opportunity to teach a computer class. Wouldn't it be great if you taught something that they could actually show you when they were finished? They could actually do something beyond coding. So the faculty from the university met with the faculty who are in the K-12 environment, and they agreed on the curriculum. The faculty from the university just came and provided technical assistance, but the K-12 faculty were completely ready to do their job. They just needed a nudge and some time for new content. Students then came into the classroom from the university and worked with the kids. The kids could bring a family member in, a parent or another family member in, to see what they were doing. So this year, we're the end of May, we'll have a conference on the campus, and then there are a number of conferences in the smaller schools. We have more than 3,000 kids who've benefited from that program, and since we've been doing it, they just started last year entering college. So what we know is the students who are in these programs with K-12, with great teachers and great infrastructure, using the day that they already had, it was no add-on, it was something that the teachers were already teaching just a tiny bit differently. Those kids graduated at a higher rate than the other kids in their schools, and they applied to college at a higher rate. And then guess what? Everyone who graduated from high school with these certifications also got scholarship money to go to college. So this idea of partnership is long-term. You can't do it 1 month or 1 quarter and feel like it's finished. It's taking a step back and understanding that we have an opportunity for jobs that are readily available, and we have people who are curious about that outcome. Why don't we build the pathway for them so that when they get to college, if they say, you know what, I really love building apps, I really loved doing data searches for complex information and data analytics, I really like that, but I think I might want to be a biologist, or I think I might really want to be in chemistry, I think I might want to be a doctor. All that work that they've done on analysis and programming and understanding and communicating and presenting their findings make them very well suited for whatever STEM program they want to head into. So this idea of understanding what industry was telling us, they're saying, by the way, we love your graduates, but you know, what's the story? You know, why aren't you getting more women? Why aren't you getting more people of color? Can you help us create a better mousetrap? And so that was funded by industry, some grants from the state of Indiana, in a number of different areas. But again, it's a long-term program that helps that some of that 32% that would not have finished high school or done any advanced college work see the opportunity and see themselves in their future. So those long-term programs can be very effective.
I think that's an excellent example. I think this work is slow work. It takes time to impact system-wide change, as we've all been talking about. I hate to say it, but we are at time, so we're going to have to end the discussion. I'd love to, all of us, to go do lunch sometime and just keep talking about all of this. But I think what you've heard tonight, a lot of really great information about the future of education and the future of work. And I think what you've also heard really speaks to the amazing work that's been done by IUPUC over the past 20, 30, 50 years. IUPUC is a tremendous community partner, and they've been incredibly responsive to the workforce over the last many, many years. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to turn the mic over to somebody.
This is what you call winging it. No, once again, I know everybody that's gotten up here behind this microphone has thanked you for coming. Thank you very much. I hope you got something out of it. Everybody's going to be around for a while out at the having some refreshments, so feel free to ask questions. Give ideas. We're here for you. We're here to support you, and we just appreciate your time. Thank you.